Hey y'all, this is Sarah back with our first bonus episode of the new season, and oh boy, we are starting out strong with Teryl Lynn Foxx, who you just heard from at the beginning of our Les Pierres episode. Teryl's a renowned New Orleans entertainer who's been winning titles across the country for quite literally decades. Miss Gay Louisiana, 1992, Miss Gay Mississippi, 1994, Miss Tennessee Continental, 1996, Miss Essence International Classic, 2014, Miss Daytona Beach Continental Elite, 2016, and Miss Continental Elite 2016. In a rare occurrence for cruising, Teryl came to us for an interview at our New Orleans Airbnb. And though Rachel and I both have no memory of this whatsoever, or I would like to believe we would have done something about it, we have a lot of table tapping on this tape. If you can't stand that, I understand, and this is not the bonus episode for you, unfortunately. But because Teryl is so lovely and such a valuable resource into New Orleans nightlife, we simply have to share her full interview with you anyway. So here it is. Enjoy.
Hi, I am Teryl Lynn Foxx. I'm a native of New Orleans, born and raised here. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am familiar with Les Pierres. I'm not going to remember the years because so much has transpired in my life, but I remember working for them. They opened the club because back in that time, there weren't many Black clubs, and especially Black clubs for women. So that was their reasons for opening Les Pierres. And I remember doing shows there on occasions because the lesbian they love the drag queens, as we were called back then. And they would invite us to come perform, at their club for special events and things like that.
Do you remember when you first went to the club, like your impression of it?
Actually, it was a very nice club. It was very small because I'm not sure if you're familiar with the clubs in New Orleans, but they're very, very small. They're not like Studio 13s and things like that in New York or what have you, but they're very small. It was a very quaint bar. I remember it having one way in and one way out.
What kind of crowd was there? Why would people go there? Like, what kind of was it a dancing place? Was it?
Well, it was a dance club, and it also was a place where certain times of day you can go to socialize, a very quiet, intimate setting, so you can have conversations. And then at a time it would change from that setting as it got later on in the evening or the night. It became a dance club where a lot of the Black gays would go at that time. Because if I recall, there was still a lot of segregation back in that time. So there was your Black bars and there were your white bars. And most of your white bars were held in French Quarters or on, what is that street? Rampart Street. So that's where mostly all of your white clubs were. And there was Charlene's, which was a lesbian club, also on Elysian Fields. And there's also, as time went on, there was one called the Ruby Fruit Jungle, but they were mostly your white lesbians would frequent those places. They would invite us over to do shows, but the majority of them would be your white lesbians. You rarely saw, a large number of Black lesbians, and I always questioned where were they, whether they socialized, because I didn't see them out there very often at all. I don't know if they had gatherings at their homes and, or things like that. I'm not really sure. And I think I never really had a conversation to see why they opened that particular club called Les Pierres, but I'm thinking it's because there weren't many places for Black lesbians to gather. So I think that could have been her motive for establishing Les Pierres.
So when would you say the bars became more mixed, integrated around here?
I remember working at the Oz, and this entertainer by the name of Lisa Bowman, she saw me. I don't remember where she saw me. I guess maybe in the streets somewhere. And she invited me to start working at the Oz. And so I started working at the Oz. But I would think maybe it had to have been the late 80s. No, it could have been the early 90s, I would think. Because at that time, blacks weren't allowed in the clubs. And if they were allowed in the club, they were asked for 3 and 4 IDs for admissions. And then once you were allowed to get into the black club, you had to make a stop at the bar because they made you buy a drink as soon as you walk into the club. I remember there was this club that was on Burgundy Street, was called the Annex at that time, where a lot of the black gays gathered at that time. And also the Bourbon Pub also gave us a night, and they called it Black Night, which was Thursday night. So a lot of the black or African Americans would go out at that particular time to their clubs. Before then, like I said, we weren't allowed in the clubs too often and stuff. So we would go. There was this park called Armstrong Park. And this is Armstrong Park. This was where the black clubs were. And this was what the French Quarter. So a lot of the blacks would walk through Armstrong Park to get to the other side to walk into the quarter. But you would see them just hanging out in the corners. You rarely saw them in the bars. You would hang out in the corners and stuff, But I remember when I started working at the Oz, it was very difficult because they thought I was like becoming white, which I couldn't understand. And they was calling me white chocolate and like, girl. And I was too white to be black and too black to be white. And it was very difficult for me to be accepted into the white bars. But eventually I did. And as time went on, and my black supporters started coming into the club, and they would tell me the problems. Well, listen, they had to get 3 IDs to get in all this kind of stuff. So I had to speak up, well, what's this all about? And so once we got that cleared up, they were allowing more blacks to come in. And to my understanding today, the majority of the cast at the Oz now is predominantly black. So I guess you can say I was kind of one to break down that barrier,
And you still wanted to work there, even though it was kind of like at first ostracizing.
I had to. I had to prove a point, not only to myself, but also to break down that barrier, just give us an opportunity, to show what we are capable of.
Can you tell us about your drag career?
It's really hard to say because I don't think I ever did drag. I think I was just myself, because I never consider myself to be a drag queen. And because that just, that just did something to me, But my characters on Illusions, I did a lot of Dinah Ross, I did Whitney Houston, I did Dionne Warwick, and Jodie Watley at the time. But of course, when I worked for Les Pierres, I was able to do anything by a black woman I was able to do. So I didn't have to just be confined to just doing those particular characters. But basically, when I worked in the clubs, and they wanted to see those characters out of me and from me.
So what would you do at Les Pierres?
Oh my God, I would do at that time, I think Regina Bell was very popular. Angela Winbush was very popular. Melba Moore. I don't know if you heard this song called Other Side of the Rainbow. Those songs were very popular at that time. And it was this one song, I can't remember the artist's name, but it was Love That Makes a Woman. I can't remember the artist's name, but that was one of the popular songs as well.
What was the crowd like at Les Pierres? Like, what did you think when you're booking a show there? Like,
oh, I was going to make some money that night. That was because, like I said, they were very supportive, and it still is to this very day. Whenever you go to a show or have a performance and lesbians, and they're going to love you. They are going to love on you. And I remember just being loved there. I felt safe there. I felt very the queen, because they would make sure that when I get out the car, someone had my bags and, things like that. And when I worked on Bourbon Street, which I was one of the first black girls to work on up the street on Bourbon, they would advertise us as men will be women. It was like just daggers, because I just felt an attack upon me of my character because that's not who I identified as, but I didn't know how to express who I was at that time. It's only through life experiences that I was able to discover who I am. I've always felt different, but I didn't know how to identify as that. And I remember I did not find myself to be anything masculine about me or anything attractive about me as being, quote, being this man. And I remember going to this party, and this guy, he was a makeup artist for a local musician here. And I was just sitting in the corner, just like watching everybody have fun. I was just, and he said, come here, I want to show you something. And so he took me to his restroom, his bathroom rather, because it was a tub. And anyway, and he sat me on the toilet and he did my makeup and he put me in the mirror and I just started crying. I just started absolutely bawling because I saw who I was at that time. And that was the takeoff from there. I said, I know I found my authentic self when I saw myself in that mirror.
How old were you?
I had to have been maybe 19, 20.
Why do you think that makeup artist just like saw something in you?
I would think so, because I remember as a child, I had been maybe like third, fourth, fifth grade, somewhere at that time. And at that time, when you had a parental conference, there was a cloakroom. It was a classroom and it was a little cloakroom where you would hang your boots and your raincoats and all that kind of stuff. And you put your backpacks in this particular room. And when it was a parental conference, while your parents were sitting in the classroom, you sat in the cloakroom. And so I'm listening to this teacher talk to my mother. And she told my mother that she should seek help for her son because he was too nice of a boy to grow up that way. So I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, what the fuck? And I go home and I thinking, oh my God, I might have a third arm coming. I'm examining my body, thinking I saw, she saw something. She saw something. I think when I saw myself in the mirror, when I saw myself for the first time as this beautiful woman, because, from so many years I was just searching, trying to find, because they would always call me a sissy, and all that kind of stuff, or a fag. And I don't think fag was common at that time, but it was always a sissy, and I didn't even know what it was, and I was always very effeminate, but could not understand. I couldn't understand what it was. And then I was able to say, oh my God, this is who I am. And at that time, our community of trans women was still very small. It was very, very, so I had to seek out those girls in the community to find, because I always hung with a bunch of gay men. So I had to seek out a whole nother community to help me, with this. And so, well, girl, this is what you do. Here's the doctor you go to see and things like that. So that's what I mean.
You knew that trans people existed before you saw yourself in the mirror?
See, I don't know if I would consider or know them to be as trans.
Right.
I just thought they were like just gay men or very, effeminate men, because I never saw anyone actually dressed fully as a woman. And then when I went to the first drag show and I found that circle and it took me to the drag show and I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. I want to do this and see these beautiful women, because I would consider them to be women, doing what they do. I did my first show was at Brenda's Club, the other side. That was my first performance. I remember that very well.
What was that like? Can you tell us?
Oh, it was god awful. It was, but like, thank God I was pretty though.
How did you get the gig?
Well, because there was a bunch of gay guys that that I hung with who did drag, and the thing about it, when I hung out with these gay guys, I was always the effeminate one, but they did the drag, but there was always something different about me. And then when I started making the transition to start taking the hormones, and I didn't tell them, I didn't, God knows, because I didn't know how to, going to take it and stuff, and they started noticing the physical changes in my skin and and they said, what are you doing? I'm not doing nothing. What are you talking about? So, and then they found out, and they were not very happy because the guys that I did hang on with, they were professionals. They were teachers. One was a pharmacist at the veteran hospital. One of them had a catering service with their family, so they were very professional. And then one of them made the comment, who do you think is going to hire you looking like that? Of course, I could no longer teach because I was going through my transition then. Of course, I was not going to have a person of trans experience teaching the kids, especially around that time because I graduated in 81. So I was teaching like in 82, 83, and So, and then of course, when I did no longer teach, I had to find some avenue to support myself. And that was through drag and find myself doing shows. And of course, I had to, I'm not going to say I had to, but I felt I did because I needed some way to support myself. So I became that sex worker, and so doing the shows and being, a sex worker at that time. And then I started competing in this competition called Miss Louisiana. That was my first national title, but there were other competitions within the area I would compete for. And I remember, oh my God, there was this pageant in New Orleans called Miss Vous Carré. And I was the only Black contestant. And I was like 5 minutes late. They would not let me into the competition. So what I did was for every category, I was supposed to change clothes. I went in the restroom and I changed clothes and I walked around the room. I just walked around the room.
Did it kick you out or anything?
No.
Oh my God.
No, but I just could not compete because I was late. That's fair. That's fair, but they didn't start on time anyway. So, I still had time to get ready for that first category. And then from there, I went to other pageants and Miss Louisiana. I went there twice. And it was like my first time competing on a national level, had no clue what I was doing. So the second time I went, that's when I won. Because then I went to Miss Gay Louisiana. First time, made the top 5, got best overall interview. So, yeah. And I started off my pageant phase. So I competed for so many years at Miss Louisiana and Miss Continental and all those different things like that. And when you had a national competition, there was so many different people there. And you would do promotion, pictures. And you would have your name and your telephone. You would just pass those out and leave those. And you would be lucky to get a call. Someone would call you and say, hey, I have a booking in such and such a date, and are you willing to come down to Florida, Alabama, any place like that, Anything that was under 6 hours, I would drive. But anything over, no, fly me, yeah. But, yeah, it opened many avenues for me. And even when one of the shows, they had a fashion show and they had the female impersonators, whether do I illusions. And I did the Diana Ross. And then a few days later, I forgot what the person was called, but they worked at Canal Place in Saks Fifth Avenue. They had this modeling troupe called The Mannequins. And so she called me and asked me to come into the store. And so I said, well, what is this all about? So I went into the store and she said, well, have you thought about modeling? I said, well, no, I haven't. So that's how I started modeling for Canal Place in Saks Fifth Avenue, because they saw me, in that, at that event. And so they said, I think she could be good at selling our clothes. And I did. I did that for a while. But I'll never forget when we went on hiatus. And when we went on hiatus, like a few months, and I decided to get my breasts done. Oh my God. So after the hiatus, we went back to work and she looked at me. She said, what have you done? I said, what do you mean? What have I done? She said, this, because I was that perfect size 02, and when you have a model, you catch them very flat chested to wear the plunging neckline. She said, you can't wear that anymore. You're going to look vulgar. I said, okay, no problem, but I didn't lose my position. I still was able to model for them, but I couldn't wear. Mm-hmm.
As a model of women's clothes, they were like, you shouldn't have breasts.
I shouldn't have had, yeah.
What was the process like at that time of like getting access to hormones and surgery? Is that a whole?
It was very underground, because we didn't have anyone to help us navigate through this process, so everything was the word of mouth, well, girl, I found this doctor. And going to this doctor, was like really shady because they never did any blood work like an endocrinologist would do to check your level. He said, what do you want? Write up a prescription. You go to this drugstore, and I guess they had a network with the pharmacist and the doctor. He write a prescription. You go to this particular doctor, and they would just prescribe you the hormones and the shots and the pills or whatever you wanted. And it was like, We didn't know what we were doing.
Was it expensive?
Not as expensive as it is today, you know. And I would think, and then a lot of the girls, see, for instance, if you did not have a doctor or you didn't want to go to the doctor, some of the girls who got this, I don't know, they were on this program where they were able to get the hormones at a cheaper level, a cheaper dollar amount, and they would sell it to you for that cheaper amount. So everything was like black market, you know, which was very dangerous when you think about it, you know, because like I said, there was no one to monitor your blood. You could have overdosed, you know, you could have fried your liver or whatever, you know, by taking that and stuff. But so much has changed throughout the years now, you know, and so many doctors and so many resources are available for those young people of trans experience at a younger age and stuff than they were back in my time.
Like, you didn't experience any, as far as you know, like, health effects from using the black market?
Thank God, no. So I've never had any health issues at all with it. And I'm so glad that I'm able to live this time because I'm able to help these younger people, you know, who are transitioning, to help them navigate, because I didn't have anyone to help me through this process, and was just learn as I go, you know, and I lived through that, the AIDS epidemic. I lived through that. I mean, I've had friends who didn't make it to 25. Oh my God, it was very sad when one of my girlfriends was killed because some guy picked her up and he thought she was a woman. And of course, you know, as you can see, this is happening today still. And I went to her to view her body, and I'm like looking like, am I at the right place? Because I've never seen her as a man. And her parents were not going to allow her to be, you know, put away as this woman that, you know, that I knew. And I was like, oh my God, that would just hurt me so bad, because I just never saw, you know, and never perceived them as being anything but a woman. Natasha. She was beautiful. I mean, absolutely stunning. I remember her. But like, you know, at that time, that's what parents did. That's what, you know, they didn't understand at all. But I am so thankful that I was able to move back home with my parents, because they got to understand me and to see me as this woman. And to move back home for a period of time because I got arrested for prostitution. Go figure. But anyway, they came and got me out of jail, because if I'd have called any of my friends, they would want their money back tomorrow. So I had to go back on the street to get them their money. So I said, you know what? I don't want to do this. This is not what God created my life to be. And I called my parents, and they came and got me out of jail. And they said, you know what? You do not have to live like this. Come home. And I left my apartment. I left everything I owned and moved back home with my family. And it was the best thing that ever could happen to me, because I had an opportunity to move back home to help my parents through this transition while I was transitioning. So it was a transition for all of us at that time. And my mom, having conversations with her, she remembered those things. And, you know, she remembered, oh my God, I remember as a child, and we were playing outside, they kept on calling me little girl. And she's looking out like, who are they talking about? And I remember my mom pulling my pants down in front of all these people. This is not a little girl. She remembered all of that. And I did too. Thank God I'm not damaged. But yeah, I remember this. And she remembers it as well. And she said she wished she knew how to help me. But at that time, you know, they did the best they could. You know, it was all foreign to many people. And I do not fault my parents, because they did the best they could. There was no way to. I didn't even know how to navigate through this transition. So I need to say my parents. And I remember it was very difficult for my parents to kind of accept that as time went on. She never would introduce me as her son or her daughter. I was one of her children. I was so happy with that, you know, because when you're used to having and raising a son for so many years, it's just hard to flip that script to call her, this is my daughter. So when I heard her introduce me as one of her children, got a girl mom. Yeah.
She sounds awesome.
She was very, very special. My dad was too. That was too. A very supportive family as they got to know. Once I knew I had their support, I could do anything.
This episode was story produced and edited by Rachel Karp, with final mixing by me, Sarah Gabrielli. Our line producer is Jen McGinnity, and our theme song is by Joey Freeman. You can find us at our website, cruisingpod.com, on social media at cruisingpod, and at patreon.com/cruisingpod. Listen to Cruising wherever you get your podcasts.